You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is December 10th, 2025, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we're bringing you the people, the organizations, and the issues about liberty and all of the people trying to infringe upon liberties in your around the world and in your region. But before we jump into the show, let me tell you a little bit about the topics. We are going to talk about President Trump and his recent lowering of CAFE standards, and also to some of what he's done with California about waivers and such for the EPA. So that's all about cars. So we'll be talking about that first half of the show. Second half, we are going to get into the assault on freedom of speech and all of the forbidden gestures, words, and even thoughts in some places, believe it or not, ways that the government is attacking our speech in all these ways. And finally, our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, we're going to talk about something Ilhan recently. In fact, it relates to something from the last show we did, which was the whole welfare scandal that's happening there in Minnesota. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to our panel. We have Leon the Word Brathwaite with us, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer from the state of California. My name's Jason McPhee. I'll be your host. So we always start off with a Liberty quote that's kind of related to some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. And in this case, let's see here. Normally I have shared this stuff, so bear with me for just a second because I've got to bring this up. Okay, so in this time it is going to be Ben Franklin. And we've talked about him. He's had many repeatable phrases that have really stuck with people over the years. And I think this one is one I haven't really heard from him, but it's yet another great one from him. And he says, "Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech." And, for the people who crafted our Constitution, our form of government, who gave us a lot of the liberties we have today, or at least helped us to establish those with our government. This is the man. And he recognized that. I guess this is why freedom of speech is the first thing in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. So anyways, what do you think, Leon?
Well, I think we have said many times on this show that freedom of speech is under attack. This is is within the first the First Amendment of our Constitution, and I think Benjamin Franklin is right, because what is happening on the left in particular these days is that they are taking these words, normal words that we normally associate with normal things, they are distorting them and making them into something else, and then forcing us to actually compelling us to say those words in some cases. Because if you think about it, like take the transgender issue, a man decides to be a woman, and that so-called woman now is compelling us with the help of the government that we must accept the fact that this biological male is now female. How that, I don't even understand that leap. And when you see all of you're talking about conquering things, I mean, you think about how the left have taken. Look at the word now. We know it's abortion. We know it's a killing of the unborn. But you know what they call it? They call it reproductive health. So talk about conquering, okay? The unborn is totally conquered now. They now live at the whims of a woman who normally would carry the child to 9 months. They are now totally at the mercy. And there are other places in life where you cannot say certain words, otherwise you'll be canceled. Your life will be destroyed. Your career may be destroyed. We have seen quite a lot of that going on. I mean, let's look at the Jimmy Kimmel case, where, I mean, I can't stand Jimmy Kimmel. I can't, however, I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I cannot stand. Yes. I cannot stand the man, right? I think he says a lot of crap, but you have to allow him to say whatever he wants and let the marketplace decide if he should stay on the air or not. I mean, there was instances in his case in that whole episode, the government was involved in the background of the I think it was the FTC chairman was making all kind of threats about we could do it the hard way or we could do it the easy way, blah blah blah. This is the one thing in a supposedly free society that we don't want. We don't want the government picking winners and losers where speech is concerned. That is one of the most dangerous things you can think about. And this is exactly what Benjamin Franklin was trying to get to. When you allow the government to determine winners and losers where speech is concerned, you're obviously going to end up with a messy situation where only the elites and the favored ones will be able to speak and speak freely. This is dangerous for our society.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. It's funny you mentioned Jimmy Kimmel, and although I really think he's gone downhill since the Man Show, he had one funny thing that's really related to what we're talking about right now. But when he started his comedy show, his late night comedy show, he had this gag where what he would do is take a speech from a well-known politician, and usually it was a Republican because they're always trying to, bash on Republicans even before Trump. And what he would do is he would bleep out words just randomly, or maybe not so random, but the point is he would bleep out words that were actually just fine words, but but he would bleep them out to let you think that this person said something they shouldn't have said. And, I mean, it was quite a funny little gag, but it really gets to the point of some of the stuff we're going to talk about later in the show. And that's that, different words have different meanings. And a lot of times these things are ambiguous, and just the mere act of bleeping something out is quite ambiguous, right? I mean,
Yes.
it leads to a lot of people to different things in their imaginations that, may may be different degrees of offensiveness depending upon who the person is, I guess. So
the danger that is ongoing is that our citizens, our fellow voters, our fellow American citizens have become so complacent about these things. The First Amendment wasn't designed for us to be able to speak with someone with speech that person is going to agree with, or with speech that I am going to agree with when I'm interacting with someone else. The First Amendment was designed to protect speech, all speech, even when the speech is offensive, political speech, even when it is offensive. It does not. Speech is speech. Sure, you cannot incite violence, and then claim it's protected speech. It is not. But you can still say fire in a crowded theater. Anybody can say that. You're free to say that. But it's the consequences that we must deal with. So the issue is here, and the point is here. Our citizens have become so complacent that we are beginning to accept the government restrictions upon our speech. Take, for instance, the COVID lockdowns. I mean, look at how many doctors were punished because they had alternatives to what the government was prescribing, which was these damn vaccines. God, I wish I had never taken them. Okay, I still have a condition. I think that came from those vaccines. And the thing is, though, the government got in bed with the media to promote this single ideology, talk about destroying our society, to promote this particular ideology, this particular narrative. And the media was so happy to get in bed with them. Of course, it's the Democrats and the media is left wing, but they were happy to get in bed with them. But these sort of things lead to exactly what Benjamin Franklin is talking about. Is the destruction of our society, is the conquering of our society. When the government can get in bed with the media and promote narratives and it's forced down our throats, and people are punished if they stray from the narrative. This is like the Soviet Union. What are we talking about in a country that is supposed to be free? The land of the free and the home of the brave? What are we talking about here? That freedom is not really free? We are not free to speak as we so choose? Well, I guess we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go deep into the show.
Well, it's funny too. A lot of our liberal ideas, it came with us to some degree from Britain, and we see that's where speech is really under assault, as we're going to be talking about later in the show. But anyways, let's jump in. Usually we would probably just segue right into all the speech topics, but there's some spicy stuff. So if you're on public access, we don't want to get kicked off of public access. So you're going to have to catch all that at our knuckleheadsofliberty.com to see the whole show there, where we will be talking about all that. But right now, we're going to talk about something that's kind of big on the political landscape to shift gears, so to speak. But CAFE standards, corporate average fuel economy. In fact, let me bring up the president's page, the White House page on that. But he recently is resetting the corporate average fuel economy. And so that is essentially the mileages or miles per gallon that cars have to be designed for from the federal government. I don't see anything about that in the Constitution, but that horses or buggies have to get a certain amount of mileage before. I don't know. But anyway, this is something we're doing now. We've been doing it for a while, and it really ties into our emissions laws and such. So and this is really huge too in our economy. So let's jump to the video that we have on that to get everybody up to speed. Here we go.
Flanked by auto executives in the Oval Office Wednesday, President Trump announced plans to roll back fuel economy standards, saying it will reduce upfront vehicle costs by at least $1,000.
We're making it easier for every family to afford high-quality cars.
The new proposal would lower fuel economy requirements from more than 50 miles per gallon to 34.5 miles per gallon by 2031.
These policies forced automakers to build cars using expensive technologies that drove up costs, drove up prices, and made the car much worse.
Former President Biden had put the higher standards in place, also signing an executive order to make half of all new vehicles sold in the U.S. electric by 2030, arguing they save money for Americans in the long run and reduce pollution.
That's a lot, but wait, there's more.
Trump is taking a wrecking ball to the biggest single step any nation has ever taken to cut global warming pollution, cut oil use, and save consumers money at the gas pump.
President Trump says he's bringing the automobile business back.
After falling by Biden, U.S. auto production has surged by 10% so far this year.
This is the latest step by the Trump administration to roll back Biden administration policies related to electric vehicles and environmental policy. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act President Trump signed in July ended tax credits for electric vehicles. That same month, his administration eliminated fines for automakers that did not comply with the federal fuel economy standards.
And this battle isn't just being fought at the federal level. This is also happening at the California level, too, as the Trump administration earlier this year was going after California's waivers that allowed it to have different, more aggressive standards than the federal EPA.
President Trump is also planning to approve measures to overturn California's policies that curb tailpipe emissions and smog-forming nitrogen oxide pollution from trucks. Now, these signings come as President Trump has pledged to revive American auto manufacturing and boost oil and gas drilling here in the U.S. California Governor Gavin Newsom and California environmental officials, though, say what the federal government is doing is illegal and that the state does plan to sue.
They said it couldn't be done. But boy, it's had us tied up in knots for years. And they'd pass these crazy rules in California, and it would be 17 states would go by them. The automakers didn't know what to do because they're really building cars for two countries.
Once there you have it, Leon. Not only is this something that is happening on the national scale, essentially relaxing these corporate average fuel standards down from 55 that Biden had been pushing for down to about 35. He's also attacking California's ability to make different requirements for cars, which it's had in the past. And Under Trump's administration, the EPA is not allowing for what they call these waivers. And just to give people a little bit of background on this as well, the reason we have these waivers is because the way the environmental protection laws originated in this country, at least for the air, in California, we had severe air pollution problems in the 60s. And so we actually formed our own government agency, and it was I believe back then it was called the California Air Resources Board. It certainly is called that today. And they tried to figure out how to deal with the smog pollution problem that was happening in Los Angeles and other areas of California. And so they pioneered a lot of the things like catalytic converters on requirements on cars and such. So, and that actually preceded the federal EPA doing a lot of these things. And that's kind of why California has this special status where they're granted waivers that allow them to try to tackle issues a little bit differently from the federal EPA. But under Trump, they're not allowing that now. So they are rescinding a lot of these waivers. So anyways, to you, Lee, I'm sorry. I've just got carried away with this one.
The most fundamental question is what the hell is the government doing in dictating how cars should be manufactured? Why should government even have a role in this matter? The car makers, we have several car makers, many car makers, some are American, some are foreign based. I mean, foreign like Toyota is a Japanese company, but they have a lot of assets here in the United States. Why is the government trying to dictate how a car should be manufactured? Are they trying to say that they are better car makers than the government is a better car maker than the manufacturers themselves? This whole CAFE thing, which came in 1975 as a result of the oil embargo out of from the Middle East, from all those OPEC countries that was trying to drain us for as much as they could get for the oil, which is fine. That, I mean, if it's something on the open market, let them get whatever the market can stand. But now they're talking about the whole idea about, oh, we're going to save the environment with these CAFE standards. It's a bunch of nonsense, quite frankly. Okay, over these tailpipe emissions, we're gonna quiet them down, and everything is gonna be nice and wonderful, and we're gonna end up in this environmental utopia. It is nonsense. There's no way the government can dictate these things. Okay, they cannot choose winners and losers and come out with a good outcome. They never do. Okay. And I'm glad to see Trump is doing something about it in terms of getting rid of these well, he's not totally getting rid of them. He's lowering them, I guess, these CAFE standards. They should get rid of the CAFE standards. I don't see why the government need to be telling car manufacturers how to make their cars or how much miles per gallon a car should be getting. This is no business of the government. And you're right. Where do you see that in the Constitution? I never saw that in the federal Constitution, and I don't think it's even in the California Constitution. But here we have governmental authority, both the federal and the state, taking upon themselves to dictate all of these things. They're telling us how to make cars. They're telling us what type of cars should be on the road. The next big push now, oh, we want electric cars. As if these electric cars are going to take us to some kind of utopia. These damn things don't even work pretty good because they are charging stations. Excuse me. The charging stations are all over the place. It's so damn hard to find one. When you do find one, it takes forever to charge. Excuse me. To charge the cars. Now they're telling we're going to have these fast charging stations. I want to know what they mean by fast, quite frankly. Usually fast, when the government says it, usually means something else other than what we normal people know fast to mean. It's just so ridiculous to have the government.
Leon, it does remind me of our fast bullet train, the one that is just crawling at the speed of a speeding snail.
Yes. This is exactly what I'm talking about. When the government says fast or bullet, you know what they're talking about. It's nothing resembling that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well,
we go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I brought up this chart just so that people can kind of see how cafe standards have progressed over time. And it's like Leon said, this came out of the, oil embargo and, kind of the crippling inflation that we were getting in the 70s. And this is showing that, they tried to force up fuel economy standards to help people save money. It's always funny. Don't worry, government's got a plan for you to save money. but the thing is, I mean, I guess, from a central planner perspective, I guess their heart was maybe in the right place. I don't know. But it does show the mission creep, right? Because now these corporate average fuel economy standards, they're not driven by a scarcity of access to oil. They're driven for environmental. Sorry, I don't know if I got frozen out there, but I mean, they're being driven by environmental considerations. So,
Exactly.
This is something to, just understand with government. It says one thing and later on, I mean, think of that.
That's something else. Yes. They always have some secret plan in the back in their back pocket, that when whatever they brought about first, like in the cafe standards, that was because of scarcity, oil is running out and blah blah blah. We got to make sure a barrel of oil, a barrel of gasoline could take us further, and all these sort of good things and that kind of stuff. And now that, well, we don't really have shortage of oil now we have oil in abundance and all that kind of stuff. Well, we have to think about some new lie to tell the people. It has to do with the environment. You got to save the environment. As if these jackasses, pardon my language, as if these JAs, I guess, could save the environment. Like they could do something that will stop the earth from warming, or they could stop the earth from cooling and stuff. By the time they get around to it, everything will already change so drastically, it would mean nothing anyway. So I mean, it's just a waste of our taxpayer dollars. That's all it's going to come down to. Biden spent all these dollars on the Inflation Reduction Act, which have nothing to do with inflation reduction. But in that Inflation Reduction Act, they had appropriated some $7-8 billion to build charging stations, which of course is going to save the environment. I think 7 or 8 charging stations got built with the $7 or $8 billion that they spent or was authorized.
I hope we're a little farther than that by now, but yeah, there was a time when Pete Buttigieg was in, when they just you could count them on 2 hands. Right?
Yes, well, I haven't heard of any remarkable building since even since Trump came in. What happened to all that money? Or did it get lost in Minnesota or something? I don't know. I would like to know.
Yeah. 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 I wonder if we've got all these shipments of copper wire heading to Somalia.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and in case you're wondering, on price, let me pull this one thing up about, because I've been shopping for cars in the last year, and I got to admit, it is sticker shock if you jump back before the pandemic and you're looking now. I mean, it really feels like they've gone up a lot. And this is a chart from the Fred that, covers a similar period that we saw in that last graph. I guess we'd start the graph right about here if we were matching it up to the cafe standard graph. And of course, that's pretty close to where things start going up. Maybe that's in anticipation because the law actually passed in 73, 74 for cafe, and I think it went into effect in 78. So, the prices start going up as they're having to start changing their production, right? And of course, you can see what the pandemic did to car prices. That's a really steep climb right up in that area. But one thing, though, I did want to bring up, and it's because the environment can be kind of a complicated issue from a libertarian aspect, and so there are reasons why we might want to have some government involvement in environmental concerns. And I actually have a video of Milton Friedman talking about that. And I'm not sure if we can squeeze that in before we lose our time with public access. I think I think we're a little bit too squeezed. So, we'll just talk about it a little more until we get to the public access break, and then we'll show it on the back end of that, because I don't want us to lose our lose them halfway through the video.
Well,
but
yeah. But the point is though, the point is though, the overarching point in all of this is government be getting so much more involved in our lives that they think it is their job to set standards for manufacturers. Well, they have to set cafe standards. They have to set safety standards. They have to set this. They have to set that. They have to set the other. And they just keep going on and on. So much more involved in our lives that every time we jump in our car, oh, good Lord, the government is going to protect us. And this is a serious failure on us as citizens, because we allow these things to happen. These politicians come along with these nice, beautiful, wonderful words and tell us, oh, they're going to save us. And we forfeit. And we vote them into office. And they pass these ridiculous things. And they just keep going.
Well, as you alluded to, Leon, it's not just emission standards, but it's safety standards and all kinds of other standards. Gosh, I can't imagine. There's probably some crazy standards I'm not aware of, but the safety standards set by our NHTSA. In fact, NHTSA is the one I think that controls the CAFE standards too, which, it's kind of funny for something that's sort of an environmental thing. But, as we're going to talk about Milton Friedman in just a little bit and his ideas are pretty well clarified on thinking about libertarian ideology as far as government regulation when we look at car safety in two different areas. One would be a law that requires a car to have brakes, maybe working brakes, right? I assume there's a law, right? And the idea is because those brakes are to protect somebody who has nothing to do with you driving. They just happen to be walking out on the street, and if you come barreling down, you're exposing them to massive risk that you might run into them. So having brakes is a good idea, but the seatbelt is only to protect you, the driver, for the most part. And so requiring a law requiring you to be strapped in would be kind of an anti-liberty law, because it's a good idea for you to do it, but that should be your choice, the risk that you're exposed to. And by the way, if you're watching us in public access, you're going to have to tune in to knuckleheadsofliberty.com to see the rest of the show. So, Leon, did you have any thoughts before we jump in a little more on Milton Friedman?
I'm a little bit perturbed by something you just said. Okay. Do you think there should be a law requiring a car to have brakes?
Yeah, I think so. Because you're talking about exposing. Well, you're exposing somebody else. If you are barreling down the road at 80 miles an hour in 2 tons of metal, right? And think about, for instance, do you think that these immigrant truck drivers should be required to have a commercial driver's license, or are you just cool with letting them all on the road as Biden was?
No, I'm not cool about them being in the country to start with.
Okay, but
they shouldn't they should not have any legal license here because they're here illegally. That's a different issue.
No, but they're here. Would you want somebody to, I guess, be? Obviously, you could say, okay, I don't want somebody to necessarily be here, but would you want somebody to be able to pass a test to show that they can read the road signs before they get in a big rig that weighs tons and tons and then decides to take a jackknife turn on an interstate right in the middle? I think, the idea that this is sort of a commons, right? The road, you don't own the road, I don't own the road, and so we've got to have some kind of common standard on what the heck the rules are going to be on the road. Unless you think we can all just determine our own rules on the road.
Well,
you'd be a lot more libertarian than I am, Leon.
I'm a little bit perturbed by this, because why would a manufacturer who worth his salt would manufacture a car without brakes?
Well, yeah,
Why?
I mean,
Why would it? Why? What could be the rationale? Could you give me any rationale where a manufacturer will make a car without brakes, without some mechanism to stop the car?
It seems like it'd be crazy, but I guess the issue would be maybe not necessarily on the requirement of the manufacturer, but maybe on the requirement for registration. Like if you want to drive a common roads that are owned by everybody, right? I mean, our taxpayer dollars. Would you want somebody to be able to register a 10-ton truck driving down the freeway with no brakes? I mean, the government says, okay, yeah, you can drive that truck, and you're essentially just this giant missile at 80 miles an hour if you have no brakes.
Well, okay, let's suppose we were living in my world here for a second, and we allow somebody to register a vehicle, okay? Register a vehicle with no brakes, okay? You want to tell me now that person will have to have some kind of insurance? I don't think any insurance company will insure such a person. I'm not talking about the government requiring insurance.
Well, yeah, no, I was just going to say that begs the question that you're saying that the government has to. I know a lot of people who will drive without insurance, right? I mean, we see them all the time.
Sure. But then they're exposed to some sort of lawsuits and liabilities and that kind of stuff, which will come out of their personal assets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Assuming they have.
So the point is,
right? I mean, suppose you have no assets other than your broken down car, so you have nothing to take, which is something we see that happens really often out there, right? And then that's why we're forced to have this why we have to carry this insurance that covers the other person, right? In an accident, because the idea is, I mean, these things all seem a little bit crazy, but the idea is that they're trying to make sure that everybody is somehow covered when they're on the road to some degree. So there's some kind of liability, I guess, out there. But
and you don't think the marketplace can take care of this problem, Jason? Seriously?
Well, but the
everything
problem
you just said to me there, you think the marketplace cannot take care of this?
It might be able to private roads. The problem is that we have government roads, right?
No. We have public roads. Let's
yeah, then I don't think so. It's a tragedy of the commons. Yeah. The government winds up using our tax dollars to build the roads, and if the government often doesn't make good decisions about its own, about how it stewards those tax dollars, right? I mean, if you build a private road, you want to make sure people aren't crashing all over your road, destroying it, doing all kinds of other things. So you're going to set standards for anybody who gets on your road. You're going to say, you can't be on my road unless you show that you've met certain standards to ensure me you're not going to destroy it. I mean, we see this happen all the time, whether you rent a house or anything. You got to meet standards that the owner sets if you want to be able to do that, right? So, but when government does it, that's why we see every government thing fail when it's government housing, right? Well, government doesn't care. It's your money, not government. I mean, right? So that's why all these public housing projects turn into crap after a while, right? I mean, because it's, they don't have the proper incentives. So, and I mean, you could make the same argument there, right? You could say, do you think anybody would move into public housing and wreck everything? Well, yeah, exactly, right? We see it happen every day, right?
So your contention, I suppose, is that because it's a public road, and for the most part, that's what it is here in the United States. Because it's a public road, the government must be allowed to set the standards by which we travel upon that road. Is your contention?
Yeah, I mean, because it's owned in commons. So, I mean, they're taking the money by force. Do you want there to be any standards on the road? Including how the road is built and everything else, or do you just blindly want the government to take your money and have no standards?
If they build the road, I fail to see why beyond building the road, well, it's our road or the taxpayers' road. Beyond that, I don't see why they have to dictate anything about the vehicles that travel on the road. I don't see why.
Well,
It's a private vehicle. It's a private vehicle manufactured by a private company, and the marketplace will surely take care of all of the bad actors who will want to travel up on that road. If not the marketplace, certainly law enforcement.
What would you say, law enforcement? Why would law enforcement do that? If there's no standards, well, why do you need laws then? I mean, right? Because we're literally arguing whether you'd have laws for brakes or anything else. Well, why would there be any speeding laws?
Well,
then?
if you're traveling upon the road and you kill someone in the process, wouldn't you want that person to be prosecuted? If you kill someone,
I say that you've committed a violation of that person's property rights, and the issue is, do you want to give somebody the potential, I guess, to potentially have a truck where they kill hundreds of people? I guess, I mean, they could go down the road in a tank, right? So suppose a crazy guy gets a tank and he's deciding, I'm driving down the road because there's no standards, I can have a tank now, and oh, it just so happened I don't know how to stop in my tank. Now I've just rolled over 100 cars, squished everybody. That's okay, because now we can bring them to court afterward. I mean, you can kind of see that they're taking on massively more risk than they could ever possibly be held accountable for, right?
Well, let me ask you that, do you really believe, Jason, that there will be individuals who will get into something like a tank, or get on the public roads, and they don't know how to stop the vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, we see people do crazy stuff all the time. I mean, this is the thing, right? I mean, we already see this happening in all these other government instances where the government owns what it is that the commons that people are dealing with. People do crazy stuff there all the time, right? So I mean, I think the issue is you're trying to deal with some liability issues, right? Of how much risk some people are exposing other people to. And this is the argument, by the way, that Milton Friedman is going to make on the environment. Let me bring that in, and then we can jump back to this, because there's actually some parallels, I think, to the argument he's making too. So let me jump into this one, because I think this will be illustrative for anybody who's a libertarian and they're wondering why the government should have even any role in the environment.
Key feature of a libertarian view is that you should be free to do what you want, provided you don't prevent other people from doing the same thing. Okay. And so the only case for government is when it is not feasible for market arrangements, make individuals pay, compensate others for any harm they impose on them. If you and I enter into an agreement to buy or sell something, well, that's our businesses. Right. You may lose, I may lose, or more likely we're both going to win. We're not going to enter into it unless both of us think it's better for us.
So I found this particular video of Milton Friedman very interesting because it helped inform me about his views on the environment. And in a normal exchange, as he says, it's really just between the two parties. But what happens when there's a third-party effect that happens, or a third-party harm from that exchange between those two people to a person who has nothing to do with their exchange? Well, let's find out a little bit more in an example Milton Friedman's about to give.
But there are cases like the power plant that emits smoke that dirties my shirt, in which the company is imposing a cost on me for which I'm not being compensated. Those are the only cases. But you have to qualify that by noting that when government enters in, it also is emitting smoke. It's also imposing costs on third parties, because it's always a very imperfect arrangement. And moreover, it always has to collect taxes. And in the process of collecting taxes, it's, as I always say, there's a smokestack on the back of every government program.
A smokestack on the back of every government program. By that you mean a distortion in the marketplace.
Right. And imposing of costs on third parties for which the third parties are not compensated.
So the key takeaway that Milton Friedman's getting at here isn't that the government should involve itself in every exchange between two people. It's only in the case when there's a third-party harm, somebody who has nothing to do with the exchange but is having his property damaged, due to some effect of the exchange. I think one of the things he's also trying to warn us against, though, also is that there's an impact from government intervention as well. So you always want to make sure that, I think Milton Friedman kind of phrases it, that the size of the smokestack on government doesn't outweigh the size of the smokestack that it's trying to correct. And that's a very real issue, because a lot of times government can potentially do more harm than it is doing good.
Key characteristic in which you find a circumstance where it's legitimate for the government to intervene would typically be where property rights are vague or diffuse. Is that correct?
And where it's almost impossible to make them
establish them.
precise. That is a problem in the case of the power plant.
All right.
Is that there's no way in which you can say you have to get the agreement of each of the persons whose shirt you're going to dirty,
right,
and pay them for the privilege of dirtying their shirts before you can do it.
So, yeah, not quite a safety issue, but still a harm issue that he's talking about there. To my mind, that's a much lesser harm than somebody who might accidentally crash into 100 people.
Well, yeah. Jason, I don't know if there's a law that requires brakes, okay? I don't know. But I could bet you when the first set of cars were manufactured here in the United States, there was no law requiring brakes. I'll almost guarantee you that.
Well, certainly there were no cars when the Constitution was written, but they didn't require that the horses have brakes.
Okay, that's true. That's true. But even when we are using horse and buggies, we had a mechanism by which you could stop them. Okay? And even when the cars came about and started replacing the horse and the buggy, there was always a mechanism by which you could stop them. But the brakes came later. I'm sure the law about brakes came later.
Sure.
Why was it necessary to put that law in the books? I cannot come to comprehend that.
I think sometimes we see these laws with, especially like in environment, initially there's not enough people. There's not enough, I guess, shoulder to shoulder activity between people that there seems to be any reason to do it, right? Like imagine like one person out in the forest and he's got a campfire going. Maybe you'll smell the smoke from maybe a mile away at most, right? And you're not going to barely see anything except maybe a little tiny gray plume. Now imagine if there's 100,000 people up in those hills and they all have campfires going. But I think you're going to see an awful lot of soot in the air. It's going to completely change that whole environment. And I think, when you get more than just a handful of cars, but you get suddenly, hundreds of thousands of cars going back and forth. And now from being able to only go those horses and buggies, maybe 10 miles an hour, to now suddenly they're going 80 miles an hour, right? I mean, you got the Autobahn in Germany. I mean, you could be going over 100 miles an hour. So, I think there probably has to be some, I guess that the risks change, I guess. And certainly from a libertarian perspective, I want to see government do as little as possible, but it does seem like there's some thresholds where you impose a risk that can be massive at some point to a whole bunch of people and maybe everybody in that community. I mean, would you want somebody assembling explosives next door to your house? Right? Would you want there to be a rule that says they can't do that? Because otherwise, it'd be one thing if there's a bomb making factory and you said, well, that land's pretty cheap next door. I'm going to move next to them bombs. But it's another thing if like you're both living in a residential area, you both have a house, and then the guy next door decides he's just going to start assembling munitions in his backyard. And, things that could blow up the entire block. I mean, wouldn't you want there to be some kind of, don't you agree that he's imposing a certain amount of risk on you that you had no, that you're having no say in, and that's kind of not right?
Well, okay, sure. I mean, I wouldn't want my neighbor to be imposing risk upon myself and my family. Obviously not. I wouldn't want that. But the argument is here, should there be a law that says you can't build bombs in a garage? Is that what
you can't assemble explosives, I guess. I mean, we're not talking like firecrackers, something that, would be so small that nobody would notice. But, I mean, why not?
But firecrackers can do some real harm. I've known about fires, serious fires that have been caused because of firecrackers.
Yeah,
right.
And I mean,
so where would you draw the line then? Where would you draw the line?
Well, and that's a perfect example because, like here in California, some of the laws are pretty insane about the amounts of not being able to do fireworks. But the opposite side of that argument is saying, well, suppose you had a shake roof and then somebody's bottle rocket lands in your roof, and then suddenly it's setting your whole house on fire. Now you could certainly say, hey, if you can find the person, right? Because bottle rocket, it's going to be hard to identify maybe where exactly it came from. But suppose you found the person and it's a kid, and the kid has, $100 to his name, and you just lost a $100,000 house, or nowadays a $500,000 house, right? So
no, Jason, no. If it's a kid did that, and I'm assuming when you say a kid, somebody under the age of 18, if that person under the age of 18 is living in his parents' home and he did that, then I will sue the parents.
Okay. Well, so the kid, you might have a way. Now, suppose the parents are in public housing. Right. Sure, you can take this government home. Of course you can't, because the government owns it. Right. So, but what I'm saying is, if people are exposing other people to a lot of risk, I kind of hate the laws here on fireworks, but we can see the same logic at play there. I kind of think they've gone too far with some of their fireworks regulations, but I mean, it's sort of the same give and take principle, right? That we're dealing with there. And I mean, if the extreme would be, like you said, if somebody's literally building explosives next to you, that's a huge risk, right? So,
I will concede to you that these are some real thorny issues to deal with, but once you start down that slippery road, we end up like California. We always do, with insane regulations about firecrackers, insane regulations about the environment, insane regulations about safety standards. Once you start down that slippery slope, so the issue always comes back to, where do you draw these magic lines? And I don't think you have a good answer, and I certainly don't have a good answer to that.
Well, certainly the hardcore, anarcho-libertarians who would say, look, this is something that you deal with afterwards in private courts and everything else. But there is something where, to me, it does seem like a problem when some people can impose massive amounts of risk on other people without there being any way to charge for it. I mean, we see when somebody takes a job, usually, they make an employer pay for that risk, right? If you were, painting, somebody's front porch, that's much different than if you're painting the piers on the Golden Gate Bridge, right? And if you got to go up there, you're probably going to charge a little bit more for the risk that you're putting yourself to and everything else than, just painting somebody's porch. Of course, maybe in some neighborhoods you might charge that risk premium to paint somebody's porch. I don't know. Yeah.
You see, Jason, this is where we just get on these slippery slopes. Okay, the biggest risk that are imposed upon us by the government, because they could take away our freedoms. If we don't pay our taxes, they could take away our freedoms. Just like that. They can do it. Okay, they could send us a little note in the mail saying, well, your tax wasn't right. All of a sudden they get scared and they pay them an next $500, $600. The IRS, that's what the IRS does, quite frankly. They do it all the time to hundreds, millions, probably millions of Americans every year. But the point is, though, the biggest risk ever imposed upon us is by the federal government, and now probably by the state government here in California. And we seem not to care about that, but we care more about, well, our neighbor might be building some kind of little explosive, some little bomb next door to us, and we should probably be worried about that. We should get all railed up about that. But what about the risk we face every day from our government? What about that risk, which is the greatest of all risk?
And I think the problem there is, like, we all perceive we're getting a different deal from the government, right? I mean, people who are the takers and not the makers, right? I mean, they wind up seeing this arrangement with the government much more differently than somebody who's the maker, somebody like Elon Musk. And then an Elizabeth Warren says, hey, where's my fair share? Comes up to, right? I mean, that's a much different relationship with the government than the taker has, who's asking Elizabeth Warren, when are you going to give me more stuff, right? so when are you going to improve my view from this public housing type of thing?
Yeah. When they're going to give me a little more, when you give me a little more crumbs in that crummy government program that they're handing out to me, yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I mean, this is a tough, topic, because it is one of those. I mean, I think the one thing you can do is you can, by principle, say there's some things that you can clearly distinguish the property all the time. Like, for instance, my arm is my arm. It's not the community's arm, right? Therefore, the cost of repairing my broken arm should never be forced on the community. It's one thing if somebody wants to volunteer to help me pay for the medical bills to deal with my broken arm, but I shouldn't. It's my arm. It's not the community's arm, right? They have no stake in my arm. They shouldn't be able to tell me what to do with my arm, and I shouldn't be able to force other people to pay for my arm. So right away, you can see with healthcare, you should be able to just, from a libertarian perspective, you should be able to get that out with any, on almost any scenarios. But it's these areas of these commons, like where we talk about a shared road or a shared river or something else, and if there's no way to turn that into completely private property, and some of these things you can, it's just difficult, I guess. And that's what Milton Friedman was getting at with the issue of dirtying his shirt from the, at some point it gets to be a really hard task when you're talking about something like air, for somebody to determine the property rights, who's going to be harmed, and everything else,
Yes.
It becomes a real project. And so therefore, then it starts to, okay, well, now it's debatable whether or not government should be in there and how much government and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully we err on the side of small government. But the point is that, you can see once the property rights aren't clear, the market's going to have trouble dealing with it too. The market needs clear property rights in order for all of these, costs of exchange to be internalized. And once the property rights aren't clear, like the air you're breathing, that's when things get a little bit murky. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
So, anyways,
we don't have much disagreement. There's some, but not much. Not much.
Well, we way overshot that issue. I'm almost tempted to say, we could, I can stick with it and do the whole, we could do all the topics we were going to, or maybe we could save the speech stuff till next week and just jump to the Knucklehead Noise Patrol. Leon, I'll kind of leave it to you, because if we do it all, I'm thinking it's at least another 45 minutes worth of.
Let's go to Knuckleheads Patrol. We could do that speech thing next week.
We promise we've got all the material developed, and we didn't make it last week to that because we were running behind on producing it. Now we've produced it. But man, we had a lot to say about a topic that I thought we were going to be through in 20 minutes. and we found a way to talk about it for almost an hour. There's only two of us.
Thank God there's only two of us, Jason. God knows what would happen if Tim was here.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so let's jump to the but I tell you, just as a preview, there are a lot of things pushing against our speech. And man, we used our good Ben Franklin quote now, and we're not going to get to the speech issue. Well, we will bring it back next week, and we'll have another speech quote as well. But we'll bring the Ben Franklin one back to you.
Okay.
Oh, Yeah, but there's a lot of dicey stuff to talk about, and a lot of it will have to do in the second half of the show. So hopefully we can really contain the first story. So there's a lot of dicey, spicy words.
Yes.
That we're going to be talking about.
You might have to send the kids to bed.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I guess this takes us then to our Knuckleheads Noise Patrol, and that is the story about Ilhan Omar here. And we were talking about last week about all of this welfare fraud that was going on, all these areas that government has no business in. You want to tie that into our last area, right? But all of this welfare fraud that was happening in Minnesota, and it was happening largely within the Somali community. And so I'm going to give you a video that's going to give you a little bit of a refresher from last week, what we talked about, just so you can kind of, see some snippets from that piece. And then Ilhan Omar, her assignment of blame in this issue is what is so bizarre. So, bear with the intro because, you got to kind of understand the story to understand it. But let me bring up our Knucklehead Noise Patrol.
The state of Minnesota is in the crosshairs of the White House. The Trump administration is launching an investigation into fraud after the Treasury Secretary claims state funds is being sent to terrorists overseas.
Now, good morning, Tom. President Trump continues to ratchet up his attacks on Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Our state now the target of a federal probe into claims that tax dollars stolen through welfare fraud have been used to support a terrorist group in Somalia.
From feeding our future to autism treatment centers to housing programs.
More investigations, more prosecutions, and more prevention.
But it looks like Minnesota taxpayers are going to eventually be out billions of dollars. And that staggering prediction comes from the man who's been serving as acting U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, Joe Thompson.
And of course, all this fraud has caused the federal government to get involved. And now Trump is on the warpath with Tim Walz, labeling him a retard for allowing all this to happen.
Yeah, and in that same post, you mentioned Tim Walz, and you called him what many Americans can find evidence for retarded. Do you stand by that claim of calling Tim Walz retarded?
Yeah, I think there's something wrong with it. Absolutely.
You
have a problem with it? You know what? I think there's something wrong with it. Anybody that would do what he did, anybody that would allow those people into the state and pay billions of dollars out to Somalia. We give billions of dollars to Somalia. It's not even a country because it doesn't function like a country. It's got a name, but it doesn't function like a country. Yeah, there's something wrong with Walz.
So all this welfare fraud focused in the Minnesota Somali community, with some of these funds going overseas potentially to help fund Somali terrorists. So naturally you wonder, what does Democrat Representative Ilhan Omar have to say about this, as she is the representative for that community? Well, let's find out where she says the blame should be placed.
There are people who have been prosecuted and who have been sentenced. If there was a linkage in that the money that they had stolen going to terrorism, then that is a failure of the FBI and our court system in not figuring that out and basically charging them.
So all presents who just, a disproportionate amount of them happen to be committing fraud in a really big way. And her thing is, it's the government's fault. It's the FBI's fault. I mean, I agree it's the government's fault for giving welfare.
It's the government's fault, for sure. Because the government sit there and let it happen. The question is her involvement in the government fraud is what we're talking about here. I am an immigrant here, okay? Just like she is. But I feel some affection for this country. I really do. And I made this my home, and I plan to die here. Hopefully not in the near future. But this woman, this Ilhan Omar, whatever the hell her name is, I wish there was some way that we could take away her citizenship and send her back to Somalia. Because if you look at some of her public statements, I am not joking. That one you just played there is mild. That's just a nice mild statement, okay? But you look at some of her public statements, and this woman sounds like she's a a representative in Congress for some state unknown to us named Somalia. Because she talks about representing Somalia. She talks about she needs to protect her people from Somalia. I thought her people was the American people, but that is not her mindset. She loves Somalia, fine. I love Trinidad, but I'm not going back there. And my heart is here. My life is here. And I thought her life being in our Congress, representing supposedly, okay, her district, but she's a member of the House of Representatives. And this woman sits, I'm sure she's involved. I mean, it's not fully discovered yet, but I'm sure she's involved with this. There are even pictures of her and a guy who's involved in the fraud. There are pictures of her on that's on the internet, and Tim Walz also. There are pictures of him and that same fraudster.
And by the way, this is the woman who married her brother to get immigration.
Exactly. She married her brother. I think when she married her brother, she was trying to help the brother get some status here. But the point
helping him to commit fraud.
Exactly. But she's in regardless whether she was helping him or he was helping her, it was fraud. It was immigration fraud. So I am telling you, I would wish the FBI would investigate this woman, and I wish we could find some way to take away this woman's citizenship and send her back to Somalia, because she believes she represents Somalia. That's what she believes. Okay, and this woman is no good for America. None. There is no redeeming qualities with her as an American, because she does not think about herself as such. So no, thank you, Ilan. You could go back to where you come from, and I'll be happy about that.
Yeah, her rhetoric has been a little bit anti-American. I mean, I can understand, some people having some problems with our foreign policy, our foreign military policy, but you should still love the fact that you have liberty here. I mean, that they allowed you to come here, be a citizen, and gain liberty. And then you have a voice just like everybody else to try to steer our foreign policy, right? So, like I said, I'd probably be maybe a little more close to hers than some people's, just because I want less intervention. Now, who knows? Maybe she wants intervention against white countries. I don't know. So, I mean, I don't want to necessarily lie to myself. She said some crazy things. We had a Knucklehead Noise Patrol about her before, as far as her intellect goes, I guess, where you could tell she was reading from a teleprompter, and she was talking about going back to World War XI. So, Roman numerals, that's 2 1s right next to each other. So,
yeah, tell me about this. And if I'm not mistaken, she didn't even correct herself immediately. To be honest,
I don't remember if she did or not.
but
the fact that
the point is,
yeah, but I mean, how can somebody misread that, though, right? I mean, you just knowing it, right? I mean, there's never been more than 2 world wars. What have you had? That you're not sure about how many world wars.
But before we leave this whole topic of fraud, but notice what Ilhan Omar is trying to do. She's trying to create this shiny object across there. Oh, let's blame Trump for this. Let's blame Trump for this. Really? This thing happened in Minnesota. A lot of it happened in your own district, okay? Under your own very nose, your Somali nose, right there.
And a place run by a Democrat governor, one who, should have been doing something apparently and was notified and didn't do anything, it sounds like.
Did nothing about it. And now you want to create this little shiny object. Oh, Trump and the FBI, Trump and the FBI, Trump and the FBI. Why? When this thing happened right in your district, right under your nose, a lot of it, our tax dollars, our hard-earned tax dollars, end up with Al-Shabaab, a terrorist organization out of Somalia. And this is something that we should all sit back and look at you and say, Ilan, it's okay. No, I want to send you back to Somalia. That's what I want to do.
Well, but it really does. It's a tell too of what a grift the left is doing,
exactly,
in the sense that, like you say, if she really was, I guess, proud of our country and being a citizen here, and then I think the first thing she would say is, hey, this is something that we shouldn't stand for, and we should figure out what the hell's wrong in my community, in my constituents, that such a large percentage of them think that this is okay, right? Instead of trying to point to other people and blame other people outside for this. This is nuts, right? I mean, but when you're on the left, you see this as a bottomless grift, right? I mean, that there's always more that you can extract from government. I mean, I think that's probably the way she sees it, is that, well, so what, we'll be back tomorrow looking for more, right?
Well, there's only get upset when they get caught. They don't get upset when the grift is going on. They just only get upset when they get caught, and they only look for people to blame because those people are now looking at them for the grifters that they are.
Yeah. Yep. And it's funny too. I mean, look at the party that doesn't want voter ID, right? I mean, why? You literally just are looking for ways to have no accountability. So this is
exactly,
it's just one tell after another from the left. So
and this this is one of the biggest grifts going on in America right now. The right to vote should be so cherished that nobody should want people to vote who have no authority to vote or have no right to vote here in the United States. But no, not the Democrats. And I'm sure Ilhan Homer is one of them. No. We have to protect, Black people. If we have voter ID laws, Black people wouldn't be able to vote because they're so stupid. They don't know how to get a voter ID. I wish one of these Democrats would come and tell me that. I really wish some Democrat will tell me that. You know how much I pray for that? I really do. Just for somebody to tell me, oh, I know you're Black, so poor you don't have no voter ID, so you can't vote. It is so absurd and racist to imply that you could just look at me and know there's a high probability that I don't have voter ID. So this nice white liberal, have to protect you. This is the grift, the racist grift that is going on. And voter ID, which is something that should be required in every state in the union. Every state in the union should have this voter ID required. But no, the Democrats don't want accountability. They want to continue the grift. Okay? They want to have 2020 all over again as much as possible. God help us.
And it is funny too, Leon, because we did talk about that before on the show, and I think we had an Ami Horowitz video. I think that's the guy's name, Ami Horowitz.
Yes.
And he walked around both Los Angeles and New York, asking people, going up to Black people. No, he went up to Black people in Harlem, and he went up to white lefties near like UCLA or someplace like that.
Yes.
And all the white lefties said, yeah, because so many Black people just don't have IDs. Disenfranchised. And they walk up to the Black person in Harlem and says, do you have an ID? Well, yeah, I have an ID.
Of course I do.
These people say you don't know how to get one. Yeah, I know where the DMV is. Just like this infantilization of Black.
Unbelievable.
These lefties. Unbelievable. It's just horrifying. It's the most racist thing I've ever seen.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Jason, I have been living in the United States. I've been living in the United States now for almost 50 years. It'll be 50 years. Not next January. January 2027. I'll be living in the United States for 50 years. I have never, ever met another Black person who have no voter ID, have no ID at all, like no driver's license, no form of ID. I have never met such a person. And I've met God knows how many Black people in my life. Some of them have remained close friends. Some of them have gone their own way, and we are no longer in contact. I have never met such a person. But all of these white liberals could tell you about all those poor Black people. They don't have ID, so that's why we can't have voter ID laws.
You know, the only way I could imagine meeting a black person who doesn't have an ID is if it was a Somali pirate. Maybe there's a big thing in Minnesota. I don't know. But yeah, it's to me, I just assume that's the most racist thing you could assume is that
you could just
look
at somebody.
They don't know how to find an ID or get an ID. Or to get up in the morning,
You know what is absurd? What's absurd about this? You know, these people saying that adults, blacks, that there's a high chance, disproportionate, do not have vote. I will bet you that these adults have children, 15, 16-year-old children, who want to get into nightclubs on Saturday night, and they know how to get fake IDs to get into nightclubs on Saturday night. I would bet money on that. Okay. But you know, the parents, even though the children could figure out how to get fake IDs to get into the nightclub on Saturday night, the parents are too stupid to figure out how to get a real ID. Imagine that. Yeah? Imagine that. And this is what these white liberals just try to sell us.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine even how you would get by in life without an ID. I mean, how would you, pay for anything, right? How would you get? I mean, just to get a job, right? To get money, yeah, you have to show the employer who you are.
Who you are. You never try. You don't fly. You don't fly.
Yeah.
I go to give blood. There's asking to show some ID. You never have done that. I mean, you never open a bank account.
Yeah.
What is this you're saying? I mean, how many places?
Government assistance. You're going to have to show your government ID.
Next thing, yes. For those who take government assistance, you didn't have to show some ID, some sort of ID, something to show who you are.
Yeah.
Or when you want to go collect Social Security, you don't show some ID for that. I know they asked me for ID when I went to get my Social Security.
Well, exactly. I mean, it just everything that you would need to do, get a job, that you would get money somehow to pay for your food and everything else, to get your bank account, like you're saying, even if you're getting government assistance, somehow you're going to have to prove who you are for all of these things in life. And they're looking at black people and saying, I imagine that you all live under a bridge. And you forage, through the forests, right? That's why you don't need ID, right? I just can't imagine how you could see it any other way if you don't think that a certain class of people cannot figure out how to get an ID.
This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. This is truly unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, we did manage to squeeze a lot of mileage out of that last topic.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Well, anyways, next week we are definitely going to talk, unless we have a guest, we will definitely get to this assault on freedom of speech that's happening we're going to cover gestures, words, and even thought. So we'll get to all that next week. But until then, Leon, you got any other thoughts before we leave? Or
free speech always and forever. We must fight for that. We must fight for that. Because if we lose free speech, we lose everything. Look what happened in Great Britain right now. What's happening in Great Britain? These European nations.
Well, we would have looked at what's happening in Great Britain if we got to those topics.
Okay.
Sorry, Leon, go ahead.
I will stop right there. I will stop right there because I think we'll save it when we do talk about that topic. We talk about what's going on in Great Britain. But the point is though, we must have free speech. We must have free speech. If we lose our freedom of speech, we lose everything. We lose the nation.
Well said. If you're watching this until the next show, think about what you can do in your key to move the ball for liberty. And until then, speak truth, speak liberty, Stay true. Stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.